For hearing us. So I will go ahead and call the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee meeting to order at 4:35 p.m. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gooch, second by Ms. Farrar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, unanimously approved. Moving on, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gooch, second by Mr. Lyman. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please do the same. The minutes have been unanimously approved. Moving on to our open issues, we'll go to our first one, which is item 4A, attendance areas process timeline. Mr. Gooch?
Okay, so our consultant can't be with us in person today. So what she has done, she's done a video for us, and she's going to kind of take us through some of the stuff that we've probably already seen, but then add towards the end of that quite a bit of information, just what has been gathered so far with the first listening session and that sort of thing. So then after that, we can have discussion and questions and that sort of thing. But we thought this would be a way to get the most up to date. And she worked on this until about noon today, so this is pretty fresh. Part of the information that she's gleaning from this is the survey. And so yesterday, I believe she said there was just 50 responses so far. Today, when she started working on this, there was over 150 or 100 and something like that. So
Was there a deadline on that?
no, it's still open too. It will
Right,
continue.
I mean, do people need to answer it by a certain, obviously?
Yes, but
we will
it's
sort of
after
discuss.
Oh,
the
okay,
phase
okay.
2 and 3 stuff too. So that will continue.
Okay.
One thing that I'd just like to mention, I didn't catch it in her summary today, but what we will be doing for the board too, every Friday in your board report, she's going to be doing a summary of the responses since the last report. So it'll be kind of, these are some trending issues that we're seeing in the responses, so you guys can kind of get a feel for what the big rocks are, or the big agreements, or the big disagreements, whatever. But she'll be doing a summary of that survey every week for you guys until we get this process completed. So just want you to know that will be coming. This first one will be Friday. Ready?
Hello, my name is Karen Jackson with Wolpert, previously Cooperative Strategies. Today we'll be going through the enrollment projections and the Phase 1 attendance area options. This slide details our overall attendance area planning process. We run a data and community-driven process that not only takes into account district goals, but also community feedback. We value all stakeholder feedback, whether it's from the board, administration, or community, and use it to craft a recommendation. Oftentimes, this means combining options or making changes to boundary options based on the community feedback that we receive. This process is split into 3 phases to determine the boundary or attendance area changes over the next 3 years. Phase 1 will be implemented in the fall of 2024 and will fill the new Russell Boulevard Elementary addition. Phase 1 only moves students into Russell Boulevard. Phase 2 will be implemented in the fall of 2025 and will fill a new addition at Battle Elementary, balance enrollments among the secondary schools, and balance enrollments among the elementary schools that will not be impacted by the new Southwest Elementary School. Phase 3 will be implemented in the fall of 2026 and will fill the new Southwest Elementary School, as well as balance the enrollments among the remaining elementary schools in the Southwest Corridor. The list on the right details the major dates remaining in this process. On April 1st, there was an open house for community members to review Phase 1 options and ask questions. Please note that the survey dates have changed from my previous presentation. We are now anticipating that the board will hear the Phase 1 recommendations on April 8th. Open houses for Phases 2 and 3 will occur May 7th through 9th. The board will be updated about these meetings and survey results on May 13th, and then be presented with final options based on the community feedback on June 10th. We are anticipating a board vote on Phases 2 and 3 on July 8th. Moving on, we're first going to cover the enrollment projections. Our enrollment projections are developed using the cohort survival method, which looks at cohorts of students moving through the system grade to grade, year to year. We utilize 10 years of historical enrollment data along with the bursts that have occurred within the district. We also consider housing within the district and census data sets. This table shows the cohort survival methodology at work. The percentages in the table illustrate the ratio of students that move on to the next grade within the district year after year, by grade, by school year. Any ratios over 100% mean that the cohort has grown since the previous school year, and ratios under 100% mean that the cohort has lost enrollment. We apply these ratios to the enrollments to project enrollment into the future. This chart shows the district-wide historical enrollment by grade over the past 10 school years. Enrollment has grown by just over 1,000 students over the last 10 years. The cells are conditionally formatted to show relative highs and lows in enrollment. Higher class sizes are shown in red, and lower class sizes are shown in blue. You can review the enrollments diagonally to watch a class move through the system grade after grade. For example, the first grade class in the 2014-15 school year was the largest class in the district at the time. You can see as they move on to second grade in the 2015-16 school year that they remained the largest class, and with the exception of the 2019-20 and 2020-21 school years, they have remained the largest class in the district. This class is currently in 10th grade, with an enrollment of 1,510. I'd also like to note that the kindergarten class sizes from the last 2 years have been on the lower side, with 1,336 in 22-23 and 1,339 in 23-24. CPS is capturing a similar percentage of students from birth to kindergarten 5 years later as it has in the past, so these smaller class sizes are likely due to decreasing births. This chart shows both the historical and projected enrollments. The historical enrollment is shown on the left in red, and the projected enrollment is on the right in gray. As you can see, we are projecting overall enrollment growth over the next 10 years. This table shows the projected enrollment by grade for the next 10 years. The biggest increase in enrollment is at the high school level, as we have some pretty large classes moving through the system right now. We're showing fairly flat enrollment at the elementary level and slight enrollment growth at the middle school level. The smaller kindergarten classes over the last 2 years are driving some of that flat enrollment at the elementary level. While this chart shows district-wide enrollment, we did develop a by-grade projection for each attendance area based on those who reside within each boundary. This information can be found in the report. The next few slides are going to show this information geographically based on the utilization of each school. These maps show the school utilizations, which is just enrollment divided by capacity, based on those who reside within each attendance area at every level. The map on the left shows the current elementary attendance areas. In the center, we have our current middle school attendance areas, and on the right are our current high school attendance areas. Any attendance area shown in blue is utilized less than or equal to 80%. Green is showing utilizations between 81 and 90%. Yellow is showing utilizations between 91 and 100%. The lighter red color is showing utilizations between 101 and 115%, and any utilization that is greater than or equal to 116% is shown in dark red, which we'll be able to see in the subsequent maps. These maps represent the utilizations for the 24-25 school year. The color scales throughout these maps are the same. Blue is showing varying levels of underutilization, and reds are showing overutilization. Please note that the maps on this slide and the next few slides are going to show utilizations of schools should no attendance area changes be made. These maps represent the utilizations for the 25-26 school year. These maps represent the utilizations for the 26-27 school year. These maps represent the utilizations for the 27-28 school year. And lastly, these maps represent the utilizations for the 2028-29 school year. Next, I'm going to cover our Phase 1 attendance area options along with the responses that we received as of the morning of April 3rd, 2024. Please remember that the Phase 1 attendance area changes are to address the new addition at Russell Boulevard Elementary and do not extend beyond filling the new space at that building. The map on the left shows the current Russell Boulevard attendance area, as well as the surrounding attendance areas. The black star on the bottom left portion of the map indicates the location of the new Southwest Elementary School. Due to the proximity of the new school, set to open in the 2026-27 school year, the Phase 1 options are focused on the north side of the current Russell Boulevard attendance area. We will need to shift the attendance areas surrounding the new school in order to fill that building when it opens. One of the goals in this process is to only move students one time at any given level, elementary, middle, or high. We don't want to run into a situation where we move students on the south side of the Russell Boulevard attendance area just to move them again in Phase 3 when we open the new school. Attendance area options focus on the north side to ensure that we do not move any student more than once at any level. It is important to note that additional attendance area changes may be made to Russell Boulevard in Phase 3 when the new Southwest Elementary School opens. Any additional changes to the Russell Boulevard attendance area in the later phases will not impact those who are moving in Phase 1. The top chart on the right shows the current metrics for each school impacted in the Phase 1 options. Please note that the capacity value shown is the 24-25 capacity and includes the addition at Russell Boulevard Elementary. The live-in enrollment shows the number of students residing within the boundary, and the utilization is the enrollment divided by the capacity. The diversity index is based on census block group data. Higher values show more diverse school populations, and lower values show less diverse populations. More information about the diversity index and how it is calculated can be found on the website. The low SES percentage is the percentage of students receiving free or reduced lunch. The EL percentage is showing the percentage of students receiving English as a second language services, and the IEP percentage is showing the percentage of students in a special education program. The next chart details the percentage of each fifth grade class that moves on to middle school together. Students from Fairview currently attend Gentry, Smithton, and West. Students from Grant currently attend Gentry and Jefferson. And students from Russell Boulevard attend Gentry and West, and students from West Boulevard attend West Middle. The map on the bottom shows the location of the current Russell Boulevard boundary within the greater CPS boundary. The map on the left shows Option 1. Option 1 moves the Columbia Square Townhomes, Courtyard Apartments, and Tiger Village Apartments from Fairview Elementary to Russell Boulevard Elementary. The area of change is outlined in yellow. The first table on the right shows the new metrics for Fairview Elementary and Russell Boulevard Elementary. The next table shows the new percentages of students moving on to middle school together. This change moves 59 elementary students and fills the addition at Russell Boulevard. It pushes the diversity metrics at Russell Boulevard closer to the district-wide average, but pushes the metrics at Fairview further away from the district-wide average. The attendance area changes remove the three-way split at Fairview and improves the feeder split at Russell Boulevard. This change also leaves room for enrollment growth at Fairview, which is expected to grow over the next 5 years. The chart on this slide shows the level of support for Option 1 from our survey as of this morning. Some of the comments that we've heard about this option is that it minimizes disruption to established neighborhoods and schools, it emphasizes keeping children within walking distance to their current schools, and maintains natural dividing lines. This option is seen as equitable and less disruptive, aligning with the goal of neighborhood schools. Some concerns include the potential overcrowding at Russell and Fairview and the impact on the diversity metrics, particularly at Fairview. It is noted that Option 1 increases diversity at Russell, which is seen as beneficial for students' exposure to diversity at an earlier age. There are also concerns about the impact of extended bus routes and crossing busy intersections for some families. Overall, Option 1 appears to be preferable for its balance between maintaining community cohesion and addressing diversity concerns. Now moving on to Option 2. Option 2 moves the area south of Broadway and west of Greenwood Avenue that currently attends West Boulevard into the Russell Boulevard boundary. It also moves the area south of Broadway, west of Glenwood Avenue, including the northern section of Glenwood Avenue, from Grant Elementary into the Russell Boulevard attendance area. The first table on the right shows the new metrics for Grant Elementary, Russell Boulevard Elementary, and West Boulevard Elementary. The next table shows the new percentages of students moving on to middle school together. This change does create a three-way feeder split at Russell Boulevard with students going to Gentry, West, and Jefferson middle schools. Should this option be recommended, that is an area that we would more than likely address in our Phase 2 changes before it can impact any students. This change moves 44 elementary students and fills the addition at Russell Boulevard. It pushes the diversity metrics at Grant closer to the district-wide average, but pushes the metrics at Russell Boulevard and West Boulevard slightly further away from the district-wide average. This change also leaves room for enrollment growth at Grant and West Boulevard, both of which are expected to grow over the next 5 years. The chart on this slide shows the level of support for Option 2 from our survey as of this morning. Option 2 has received mixed feedback, with concerns raised about disrupting established communities and children commuting longer distances. Some argue that maintaining neighborhood cohesiveness and preventing long drives should be prioritized. Others express concerns about splitting up stable districts and the impact on middle school transitions. There were also concerns about the diversity metrics in this option. The majority of the comments are surrounding the potential change from Grant to Russell Boulevard, especially regarding the disruption of walkability and community ties. Overall, while Option 2 addresses enrollment issues, it raises questions about equity and neighborhood integrity. The survey will be open until April 8th. We encourage you to respond to the survey even if you are not impacted. We are already receiving excellent feedback, both from our open house and through the survey. At this point in time, we are leaning toward recommending Option 1, but this could change as there is still time to provide feedback. Thank you for reviewing this presentation. Please consider taking a survey if you have not already done so.
Okay, questions, comments?
No, yeah, I wanted to highlight a few things. So the date change of solidifying that we are going to be making the decision or voting on this, hopefully by the end of this month, no later, is due to the fact that during our open house and having the conversations with Fairview's principal, and just really thinking about, like, depending on what we end up deciding, no matter what, there's going to be need of trying to ensure that they have long enough time to make the additional requests that might be needed for FTE of any sort, or adjustments to positions, or making positions be, instead of half-time at one school, being full-time at Fairview. And so that's trying to accommodate those needs for staff. And so I do want to highlight that, like, it wasn't an arbitrary reason of, like, kind of where we got down to that, but it really came out of those open house conversations and, like, those that we had on Monday, just really talking around what would be the most helpful no matter what change happens as they bring this in. The other piece of this is that Russell Boulevard next year will be taking in preschool numbers as well at their school building, and so that's the other piece of it too, of, like, how much new FTE or adjustment FTE even just for that in comparison to other things. So that's a part of why trying to make this space.
And that's a consideration we looked at really early with that. What sort of district classrooms would likely be assigned there? So that was when we started looking and giving Karen guidance on what numbers are we looking at in a shift. That's kind of where we capped it, at about that 60 mark, which would allow then, even though there is more capacity, it allows for those district classrooms to be able to be moved in there as well.
Yeah, and I know Karen had shared with them that over the next couple years, there's a projection of kind of looking at where births are and stuff, that they might be looking at an increase of like 40 students for a period. So, like, those things around really looking at where that utilization space is at. The other element I kind of wanted to share was being at the open house on Monday and having conversations with folks. For me, I agree, I think, from what Karen has shared here, that option 1A, from survey feedback, but also being a recommendation space, for me, something that I would like to, like, have a conversation really around too is somewhat doing a hybrid of these two options and not really touching that portion of Grant that is cut out in option 2, but really looking at the cutout of what's being in option 2 that's being pulled from West Boulevard to actually be wrapped into Russell from there. Part of that just being that I look at this and I go from somewhat of a geographic sort of standpoint there, that's a part of that area. It's also a very small number of kids that would be pulled from there, and so it wouldn't be adding a bunch of students there. And I did ask their administrator, because I talked about this on Monday night with her, I said, would you be okay if I said that tonight? And so it's not that she's like rubber stamping, saying like, yes, I agree with that, but more of like, she's comfortable with me bringing this up for conversation.
And what I think our option is with that, and we talked a little bit about in our after-action review, was probably for Monday night, bringing that as an option 3, a third option, with the map and all of that. We didn't want to flip that because of what we just shown the public,
Yeah.
but with the more publicized meeting, the open meeting, and the first look at it from the whole board standpoint, we thought we would bring that, which was that hybrid that you had mentioned.
I gotcha. I appreciate that. And then another question I had for folks is that President Waters and I were talking at the open house, and in that conversation of thinking around how do we make sure that there's enough time for Fairview to make their request of staffing depending on what decision we make. We thought about maybe it would make that it would be probably better to make this decision not in a morning work session. And so we did ask Karen if she would be available for a special session in person. And I know that she shared.
The 16th and the 17th are 2 dates that she has, so as a board, if you want to make that decision, she is available on those 2 days
And
to be in person.
And President Waters asked me to ask y'all as a committee of, would y'all be interested in us doing that? Of having a special session to make that decision? If we're able to do, if everyone's schedules are able to align with what Karen's available for.
I think that's actually not a bad idea because we can really publicize that and people will pay more attention to the fact that there is a special session that's specifically targeted at this instead of us saying, oh, there's a work session and we're gonna be talking about that. That will get lost. So, I mean, I think it's not a bad idea at all. I will have to zoom into it, but
Okay.
I'm good with
So
it.
the 16th and the 17th, specifically just talking about.
That would be us voting.
That would be
Okay,
us voting,
Okay.
yeah.
In phase 1.
And so,
So I have a quick question, because you were talking about Fairview, people moving to Fairview. There shouldn't be anyone moving to Fairview.
I might have said Fairview and I meant Russell.
Okay,
Thank you for
okay, I
correcting
was
me.
like-
That's what I was gonna
I
ask.
knew what he meant. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we'll
I
draw
was
the map.
I was like, maybe somebody didn't tell me.
sorry.
Why does Fairview need
We
to
won't
worry
leave it
about?
to a bad memory.
Okay.
We'll put it to ink.
Oh, to all of the public that listened and got confused, I'm sorry. But yeah, and I guess the other thing too, if that option that I just talked about that came out of my brain, thinking if it does get presented on Monday, would we be able to sort of open that survey up again to potentially collect feedback on that option?
Yeah, and she said that was closing. We'll have to close it at least a few days before either the 16th or 17th. But I think we could run that several days after the board meeting and we
On Monday,
we
okay.
can announce that at that time too.
So very much part of that eighth deadline being like, give us your initial feedback before the 8th so that can be sort of part of what Karen or Randy kind of shares with us around what's been collected on Monday, this coming Monday, and then probably opening up again depending on where the conversation of the board goes to collect some more feedback after that conversation.
Now I have questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just wrapping my head around this. So the survey is gonna be open until the 8th, and on Monday, are they bringing us an update or a recommendation? Because,
We're going to bring you the options that we want you to consider. And-
okay,
That's on Monday.
Right,
okay.
yeah.
And then at the 16th or 17th
Then you
will
all, we will make a recommendation of
recommendation.
one of those options, but we want you to kind of, as a first read, to have everything that you're gonna be making a decision on.
Right,
At least graphically represented.
okay. I was concerned that, we had on there that we had a deadline of April 8th, and then it's like, oh, well, they're making a recommendation. How are they making a recommendation when it's still,
And
open? But I
I'll
understand
have-
what you're saying
I'll have to
now.
talk with her just a little bit to see how many days prior to then the meeting, the actual final meeting, either the 16th or the
Right,
17th.
right.
For her to close that up, make sure the feedback is in there and that
Right.
sort of thing.
Right.
But
That
But
makes sense.
I would imagine we can run at least probably 2 or 3 days after the 8th to get some additional feedback on a hybrid, if that's kind of the way that you guys are going.
And when you're talking about the hybrid, Blake, you were talking about the current little island that goes to Fairview
Yes, sir.
and the little bubble that is at West Boulevard. Now, I also know that when it's kind of like when I was reporting COVID numbers, we reported people, but we didn't know if those actual people went to school here, So this 59 number, that's in that island, are those 59 that we know physically attend
Yes.
our building? Okay,
Yes,
all
yeah.
right,
And she's able to drill down at that level. So
Okay, that's what I
when she's
wondered.
telling you 59 students are gonna probably be impacted within 1 or 2,
Oh, yeah,
depending on a
yeah,
move
yeah,
or something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But those are, those are real people in real addresses and that sort of
That's
thing.
what I
Yes,
wondered.
Yes.
And we're able to really, in that kind of drilling down too, we're able to see if they're a student of ours, but might not go to their attendance area zone because they go to one of our lottery schools.
Absolutely,
So
yeah, right, right.
these
that-
numbers are
that's
really
in the-
tight.
That's baked into that as well, so.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
have it broken down by grade too, because that's how we would be able to determine FTE needs.
Right,
If
right,
the
right.
60 obviously, it's probably not 10 kids per grade, that would be too easy.
Can we get this presentation sent to us, or is it someplace? Because it
Part
wasn't in
of
the
it's
agenda.
already on there except her voiceover.
Oh, okay.
But
Is it on the
we will-
regular website?
Yes, but we
Okay.
will get this on there tomorrow as well.
Okay.
So we'll get the most up-to-date with the voiceover, because I think that's pretty helpful.
I think it's helpful. I'll look on the regular
Yeah,
website for
but
that. I was
we'll
looking
get
in the
this
agenda.
version.
Okay.
Like I said, this came in
Sure,
this afternoon, but that means it's fresh, it's real.
okay.
So just so we have all the dates down. On Monday, the board meeting, we're gonna hear option 1, option 2, and option 1B. Maybe, if it makes sense. And then on the 16th or 17th, we'll have maybe,
I think that's a big thing. We have
Yeah.
to see if there's enough people, right,
Right.
to meet and things like that.
And that'll
That's
be-
also a call for President Waters and Vice President Snodgrass to kind of make on that.
that will be the board, a board special session to vote on, so that we are not doing it on the 18th.
Right.
Okay.
That would be the
okay.
goal.
Okay.
But if we can't, have
Then we
enough
would do
people
it-
meet, but it probably would then be that work session,
Okay,
if that doesn't end up working.
okay.
And originally, we put the 2 options as the work session or the May board meeting.
Right.
But by giving us the 3 extra weeks and not going to the May, that helps a lot with enrollment. That helps a lot with starting to build new bus routes. There's a lot of things that really helps the FTE decisions that have to be made.
Well, and
So
families who
if
are
you're willing to
registering
do that,
eventually.
that actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the other piece that I forgot to share too is Russell's principal also talked about how that would also give us more times to begin communicating to those families that would
Sure.
be joining us next year.
Yep.
And really try to see if we can get them to come visit the building, or get those kids to come visit the building, like how we've done in past changes where some of the kids got picked up in the middle of the day, bussed over to see the school and experience the school a little bit and taken back to where they're at currently, to really try to begin making that an
Take
easy
some of
transition.
that nervousness out. This is your new school, very welcoming, and that's always worked very well when we've been able to do that.
Does policy committee need to start working on a draft policy for grandfathering fourth graders that are rising to fifth grade?
Here's what I suggest,
Because we've done that in the past. So-
but it's not a policy.
They were policies in the past.
I think they were procedures.
There was one I just had removed because it was so old, but yeah,
Well, I suggest,
it just needs to be a procedure.
well, yes, but I suggest that we get the work of the areas done. Because that's really for phase 2 and phase 3, what you're really talking about there. Get that set, then start considering, because that takes in the ability, would we be able to transport students with whatever, and that will give you more time to do that. I'm afraid if you mix the two, it's gonna get pretty muddy. When we get to phase 2 and 3, you're gonna be having a lot of community input. There's just
Oh, yeah.
no doubt about it. So I think in what we've done in the past, and we made the conscious decision, we'll get the board through the actual attendance areas and what they're gonna be, and then we'll go back and consider then what sort of grandfathering or legacy type things that you guys want to do. And then that's where we have to really put in cost effectiveness. Do we have the human resources to do those things?
Draw the maps first and then figure out how to become exempt from said map, kind of ish, in those individualized circumstances.
Now, do remember,
Yeah.
for every one of those exemptions you're
Yeah.
talking about, you start watering down the effect that you were going
Yeah.
for in the beginning. And that's to begin balancing, to balance your capacities, to do those sort of things. Also, I can't help, since this part's out there, previously when we've done this, that is largely a function of transportation. And it wasn't, can we do it? It's how much do we want to spend to do that? So if it was 16 different routes and 16 more buses, it was say, yes, we're willing to spend that. We might be willing to spend that this time, but I am concerned, would we be able then to man that additional transportation need? So it would be negligent not to mention that, because that will be a large part of what drives all of that.
I mean, that's the difference of where we're at in
Yeah,
comparison to
and-
last time we've made changes.
Right, but it's still gonna be a decision that's gonna need to be made by whoever makes it rather quickly, because if I'm a parent of a fourth grader at Grant, I'm gonna wanna know in May if my kid that's going to be in fifth grade next year is gonna be at Grant, or if they're gonna move to Russell. Likewise, if I'm at Fairview and that's the selection, and I'm a fourth grader at Fairview, I'm gonna wanna know if I'm going to Russell next year, or if I get to stay at Fairview where I've been for the last 4 years.
So you're maybe talking about 10 to 15 families.
Certainly, but it's still a decision that has to be made.
Yeah, I think,
In
I
the
think for phase 1, I think that becomes an easier conversation that potentially
Right, and
can
that's
be
all I'm
had
talking about is
sooner.
right now. Yeah,
Is
yeah, that's all I'm
that-
talking
But
about.
and
when
so,
we're talking
with the
about
larger
phase 2 and 3.
Oh, yes.
I think you would do yourselves, at the community, a big favor to keep the two things separated and clearly get the boundaries established, and then go back and see, okay, this is what we'd like to do, can we do it? Well, yes, no, yes, we can. So I
Yeah,
think-
absolutely, I don't disagree with you on that, I was just focused on phase 1.
And I would say as a community member, like if that's what we're gonna do, I want that in the survey because I don't have kids that I'm worried about, but I would wanna know about the cost of transportation to do that. I
Okay.
mean, so if we're,
Well,
if that is something later, that should be maybe expressed for people that just wanna know because we have a vested interest in money and where
Sure.
that's going and what that looks like as well.
and honestly, that, it's a pretty simple process, because you figure out roughly how many students are gonna be participating likely, and you figure your routes, we know what our daily cost is, we know what, so that's not a difficult thing to do, and we have done that when we've done. The biggest piece of that was 5 years ago when we did secondary, the high schools and middle schools. And if I recall, we added 12 routes for that to accommodate the legacy stuff that we did. And that ran for that was actually a 3-year phased-in thing, because we did allow people to jumpstart if they knew they were going to, say, a new high school, you know, and they were in maybe that freshman or sophomore year, and they knew 2 years down the road they were gonna be at a different high school, to go ahead and start. So we did that, and so that was a 3-year phased-in process as well.
So I think kind of what Andy's, if I could kind of look at that,
Yeah.
right, as like especially for phase 2 and 3, if that could be, when options do get presented, if that could be some data points that are added into things that get shared to the community and to us, I think might be good. And obviously understanding in the verbiage being like, this is an estimate, right? Like it's not a like true kind of looking at it, because you would be basing it potentially off a cost that exists now, and those costs might be very, very different in a year from now to 2 years from now. And so I think that's sort of there, but I do also think I'll pause there before I say what I say. Is that a good summary?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. I wanted to make sure I wasn't like saying it wrong. Also, Randy, from what you're saying, right, I think that's the other conversation of like, it might be more money, and the board might be very willing to do, but can we even do it to fidelity?
If we just took the 5 years ago when we did it, and you're saying, okay, we're probably gonna do a program that's gonna need 12 more buses each day? I don't know right now. My confidence level of saying, it's not there, because we're right now, we're still running on a razor's edge margin with enough capacity to run our routes. And there's some days, if the wind's blowing wrong, it's touch and go.
It's not as easy to go find
No.
12 school bus drivers at the drop of a hat.
And before, when we did it, we didn't even consider worrying about if we could get 12 drivers, because we knew we could.
Right.
It was a matter of then, how much money are we
Right.
willing to spend? So it was almost totally a financial decision at that point. But now it's compounded by financial, and could you actually staff that?
So it'll be interesting, so adding that, the transportation piece on there will be interesting. It'll also be interesting to, because a lot of the responses it seems like we've gotten from phase 1 or for option 1 and option 2 for phase 1 have been about walkability, et cetera. And adding that, if there's a walkability score that we could make where it's like, hey, right now, it's this easy for kids to walk to school with this new line, it's this easy sort of thing.
Well, we did to illustrate that last time, and I think particularly when you get into phase 2 and 3, where you're moving larger numbers, or potentially moving larger numbers. And this was a suggestion and a request that Mrs. Snodgrass had, and it was concentric walkability circles.
Yep.
So we'll do that, and that will kind of show you, and the area we're talking about right now, the thing is, a lot of that overlaps, because they are close enough together that students could attend maybe 2 or possibly 3 of those schools and still be in a fairly short proximity to home. So,
Yeah, Karen and I have talked about that some.
And as we get deeper in this and those options start coming out, that'll be some of the mapping that we'll share with you, share with the community in those open houses.
Is there any knowing that we have another big thing to talk about, is there any further discussion or comments that are burning right now?
Just as far as FTE goes, I just wanted to, for this group, and we've talked about it, the Russell numbers that we are using have some room for growth. If we have to add some, it would be at early grades. Obviously, like kindergarten's always a wild card with how many, show up in August and based on those numbers. But the other grades, definitely, 2 through 5th are all around the 20, average of 20 kids per class. And so we would have, if there's, 10, 12, 15 per grade, if you divide them among 4 classes, they're still gonna be able to absorb those kids with the number of FTE that we have built in to add currently at that school. And so we might have to add one at kindergarten or 1st grade, but that would, looking based on the numbers, based on what I'm seeing now, that would be the only thing that could happen.
And that was part of our work in selecting which areas to move, was not to get it to where it would potentially, when you're spreading that out over six grades, or, 5 grades.
There was one thing I did want to make sure gets said, in highlighting that Karen shared in the recording, but I don't think it got clearly stated. Right now, we are looking at the northern portion of Russell Boulevard to address the addition that is there. That does not mean that Russell Boulevard's boundaries will not be changed.
It means the kids that move in phase
One
one
will not.
would not be moved again in subsequent
In
phases.
phase 2 or 3 that we're working on right now. I do want to make sure that those that live in the more southern portion of that attendance area recognizes that though your kid might not be zoned to go to the new Southwest Elementary School, that attendance area will get created and will have domino effects to then more than likely there's going to be certain portions of that attendance area that might get moved to another one, depending on the options that get presented and where we go. So I think that's just an important piece because I don't want any Russell families to think, oh, great, Russell's been done and Russell won't be touched again.
And it's also probably fair to say that
We can take it, talk about that.
with every option that we went with,
Make sure it gets highlighted.
that does not mean that that group couldn't potentially move in phases 2 or 3. So if we went with option 1, that does not mean that those 2 blocks that are in option 2 couldn't potentially move with another in phases 2 and 3.
Right, because they wouldn't be affected in phase 1.
Correct, right.
Yeah.
So it's just because you look at this and say, well, hey, I really want option 1 with phase 1. If you would have been impacted in option 2, you could still be in phases 2 and 3. So continue to pay attention to this and
Absolutely.
offer your feedback. Yeah.
And the thing about Russell is, it is on the northern border of the new elementary school, which makes that, and that's one of the reasons we went ahead and did that addition there. Because although it's not in the very deep southwest part of town, it's the northern edge of that, which gives them some of that relief to that southwest pressure point.
I think the important thing is, it's not that if your school is impacted this phase, that it won't be impacted in future phases. It's that if your specific child is moving in this phase, that child, unless you move houses,
Right.
is not going to be
Yeah.
impacted.
You stay at your same address, and that student moves once in any of these 3 phases,
Yeah.
they're done. But yes.
That's a good way of thinking. Yeah.
All right, seeing no more, we'll move on to our next open issue, which is a consideration of approval to recommend the 2024-2025 capital projects. Since this is an action item, do I have a motion to recommend to the board approval of the 2024-2025 capital projects?
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'll second.
Because then we can talk about it.
Moved by Mr. Lyman, second by Mr. Willoughby. Now, discussion.
Okay, so you guys, because this is a lot of words and numbers on a screen and it's really difficult to see, I will put it up there, but it would probably behoove you to have
This
it
is
on the
difficult to
piece of,
see.
yeah, the paper was why I have my little glasses on here
need to
so I
take
can
mine
see it. There's 2 different documents that are attached, both have the same list of projects on them. One looks like this is the list of projects broken down by local funding, bond funding, and then the total. And then there is a document that looks like this, and this is the sheet that I use to determine how much revenue we have in each one of those different categories to know how much money that we have to spend with. And so I'm just gonna walk you kind of through the process. Of course, we have to figure out how much revenue we have in each category before we know how much money we can spend out of each category. So largely, and we talked, with the full board about this a little bit at the work session, there's a couple main categories of funding that go into our capital projects. Again, our capital projects fund is a separate fund from our operating fund. The revenue that goes in there that's recurring every year largely is from tax revenue. So when we set our property tax rate in August, 0.1 is of our tax levy that is $5 and some change is what goes into our capital projects fund. And so it's about $3 million in revenue, and so that is the largest portion of revenue that goes in, and what we refer to as local funding, that is a recurring revenue that goes into our capital projects fund each year. Then we have had our federal dollars, which was our stimulus dollars that will be running out on September 30th. The large majority of those will be spent by the end of the fiscal year. We do have through September 30th to spend those ESSER 3 funds, and so some of those will have projects that are rolling over that are happening this summer that are gonna be in the next fiscal year, and so that's what you'll see in the second column. And then we have our bond money, which is our debt mechanism that school districts use to be able to fund projects, large projects. And so we had again, all bonds have to be authorized by the voters, and so the last time we went to the voters was in the April of 2022, and we authorized 80 million, so now we issued then that $80 million in two separate issuances. And the fall of 2022 was the first 40 million, and we just finished that bond sale in March for the second 40 million. So now all of that $80 million is available for us to spend on projects. And so that's when we're talking, those are the columns that you see on this spreadsheet, and that's how we determine how much money that we have then to spend. So some other things that go into our local revenues, we do have some interest revenue from the interest on investments in our daily accounts that go into, that has been significant. It is over $1 million last year, and we project that to happen again for next year. So that is one of the numbers that has trended upward the last couple of years, which is fortunate because we can fund some additional projects with that revenue. And then the other large line item is what we call is our transfer line item, which are transfers from our operating fund. This line is larger than we have seen at beginning of the year in previous years, because our technology items which were previously under $1,000, our devices, technology services has all of the district devices for staff and students on a cyclical basis. Next year is the recycle year to do staff devices. Those devices are now over $1,000, and so what would have normally been budgeted in the operating fund out of operating revenue is now going to be in the capital projects. Well, that extra $3 million doesn't just automatically appear into the capital projects fund that was originally in the operating fund. So we have to do a transfer over from the operating fund to be able to fund those additional device purchases that are going to happen next year out of the capital projects fund.
Did we approve those at a meeting already?
Not the devices.
Not the devices.
Devices.
Okay.
We've done some of the others, technology services stuff that's on
Okay.
here, like
I
the
don't-
switches and stuff.
Okay.
But- So that is, a large portion of that 4.7 million is that. Also, every year that we're going to also see the lease payment for this building, the Aslan building, was purchased through what we call certificates of participation. It's a lease purchase type thing that is not covered by bond because it's not an instructional building. So that is also, we are required to pay that out of operating money. So we make a $400,000 transfer from the operating fund to the capital projects fund each year to cover the principal and interest payment on this building. Similar to that, we are also, the nature school is also handled the same way, and so that transfer is also in that amount. So all that being said, you could see that right under $9.5 million is what we have to spend in our local revenue column there. And then we have the projects, and on the same projects on the bottom of this sheet is what appears on this sheet, just in a different way, so you can see how the funding source for each one of those is broken down. So that being said, like the large ones that we are recurring that are new each year are the process for the local capital project, the new projects each year. The bond projects, again, we've talked about for a long time. We've seen many presentations in this committee on those three main projects that are being covered by the $80 million and the bonds. Is our Southwest Elementary School, the Career Center addition, and the Battle Elementary addition. We've had Ryan Hart Wilson, which is our construction manager at risk, here multiple times presenting on that. And then our secured vestibule projects, the final rounds of those are also coming out of that bond money. Everything else on here is mainly coming from local funding. And so as we move through the list, again, every school has the opportunity to submit lists. Our facilities department also has the ability to submit lists, and so then we have the responsibility to try and go through and prioritize them. And so a lot of the stuff we talked about, deferred maintenance, a lot of buildings do have deferred maintenance. Some stuff that shows up in the facility audits, depending on costs, again, all those have to be taken into consideration, but when you talk about buildings, we talk about the envelope of the building first, making sure nothing is coming into the building, because you don't want to like replace carpet but still have a leaky roof, because then you'll be replacing the carpet again. So envelope, then we have systems, which is HVAC, plumbing, electrical, those type items, then the cosmetic stuff as well. But then we also have curricular needs, things like we were just talking about, our technology needs. Our students have to have devices for learning. Our staff have to be able to get some of the jobs that we do done. And also with curricular needs, some of those equipment things that are coming from practical arts or fine arts, those things that are over $1,000, it's a lot easier to fund something that's $10,000 than it is that's $1 million. And so some of that can be fit in within the funding that we have. May not be a security risk, but it's also something that's maybe, something that's because of the dollar amount that we can fit in, like something for athletics that may not reach the level of priority one, but something that we can still fit in within the dollars that we have available, if that makes sense. Okay. So I'll walk through, and again, you guys can stop me as we go through here. I'll just walk through some of the projects. We'll talk about kind of what the ideas. Randy's here, can put his input as well as we went through this process. Again, the administration budget, we have to make the lease purchase payment on this building because we're committed to that. Debt is outstanding. The next one on here is this building. We have $500,000 that's allocated for various renovations for additional offices. We're into a situation now where we have a large storage room downstairs, but we do not have offices and conference rooms available that we really need to be able to have people in this building. And so we're to a point now where we can't do any more shuffling, especially we've come to that after, especially with the flood that we had over in the other part of our building, and to make sure that this building is using to the best of the capacity that we have. And so we're going to have to make some renovations to be able to meet those needs with additional office space to fit in conference room space, which is also a huge commodity right now.
So where is the storage going to go? 'Cause
So,
it's gonna need to relocate
yeah, so
someplace.
that's part of that, the cost that's in this would be an external storage building.
Sure.
And so that's part of the consideration, obviously. Obviously, there's probably some just cleaning out that could be done.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is definitely a component of that we will have to still make sure we have storage for. So we see that outside the building. But, when you're talking almost 2,000 square foot of floor space in this building where offices, where workspace is a premium, it just seems like we can use that space a lot better. And so that's kind of the intent.
And again, I try to do alphabetical order. It's not necessarily like order of any kind of priority. It's just for ease of finding names and projects. Benton Elementary, we talk a lot about like economy of scale and like making sure we're not disrupting buildings multiple times. We know it'll be on your agenda for Monday night. Benton is getting a large secured vestibule project that is actually a build onto the building, so it's more significant than what we've seen. So we are trying to accommodate, since Benton is already being jumped, to do a roof replacement at Benton as well. It is something that is on the facility audit that is incorporated in some of the deferred maintenance that we need there.
Yeah, I had a question about that. Is that the whole roof or a portion? Because the facilities audit was a little,
It's a portion. That's not a complete, but it's a fairly good section.
it's the section that they
that's
talk
in-
about,
That will be
2024.
involved with the transition to some of that new work that's done.
Okay,
as well.
because I know the audit talked about, there was a section that was built in 2004, and another section that was 2008. So I wondered if we were doing the whole thing or the
And quite
older
honestly, in
section.
buildings like that where we have roofs that are on different additions, sometimes most of the roof is fine and we just have a real problematic piece with one section of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So this one is not a complete roof.
Okay.
Battle High School, we are doing a wrestling and weight room renovation. Again, this is not a new building, but is it a renovation of some area that we're able to make a temporary so that they can have, we've heard a lot of communication about them not having a dedicated wrestling space and also not having equity with our other high schools with the weight room. And so we're renovating some existing space within that building to be able to make the wrestling room and an additional weight room, which those of you that are on finance committee also has some FTE implications now that they have two weight rooms available. That adds some additional capacity for additional classes to be run, which is also curricular related.
Well, an additional opportunity, because I know that those classes are very popular.
Yes,
So that's
correct.
great.
Also with the way Battle High School is located, they do not have a utility vehicle that others do have, and so they have a very old golf cart that they use, and so athletics has requested that they have a gator, so which they can be able to get around that campus. I always have an allocation for unallocated projects that come up during the year, and so that's under me. So if something comes up that has to be done, that's an emergency during the year, I have the ability to move funds out of my unallocated account. to
And the last
address
2
that.
years, you had 200,000.
Yeah, I know, and we're scraping the bottom of the barrel with the number of funds we have available this year, so I only have 150. And then the Career Center has some matching opportunities. This is something we see typically every year, that they have enhancement grants, they have equipment, things that we, either 50/50 or 75/50, which we're required to do a matching portion, but that comes out of our, and that also is something that's included in that transfer line too, that's transferred from the operating. The school bus replacement, the Career Center has had 2 full-size school buses in the past that are no longer operable, and with the workforce development opportunities that are coming up, it's important that we be able to get full classes of children from building to work site and those type things, and so that's why we're requesting for that to be replaced. Community relations is just some equipment. The cablecast server is something that they had requested, and a new computer and some cameras that are like very outdated and antiquated for that department. Field, a couple things. We have, because of the location, we need to put some fencing around that playground there for $35,000, and then also it's important to have the parking lot to redone with the Scholar Clinic being there to make sure that it's safe for incoming.
I have a question. Is this a new fence? Because the facilities audit, which of course that was in 2019 anyway, but it indicated the fence was okay at that time, which lots of things can happen. So I didn't know if this is a new portion.
My understanding is this is some fence in a little different way, in
Okay.
a new place, because there's a lot of foot traffic and
Yeah.
that there, so I think it's to kind of give our scholars a little bit more security.
Okay.
Fine arts, again.
I mean, it makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
Is,
So I think it's actually new. I don't think it's replacing per se anything that's been there a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time.
I mean, I think it's great. I mean, we should have fencing around playgrounds. Yeah.
Fine Arts has several line items here. They typically have requests for all of their musical instruments that are over $1,000. There's a line item for that to replace instruments that they have and they keep track of that on a rotating basis. There's also, they requested some storage at Lang Middle School. Of course, if we're buying instruments for that school, we want them to be safe. We don't want them to walk away or have destroyed, so we want to make sure that we're having that there. Also at Rockbridge High School is asking for some additional storage for $9,400 there. And then we've seen stage curtains at our middle schools on a rotational basis the last couple of years. Gentry Middle School is the next one on the rotation to have the new curtains for the stage replaced there for $30,000. And also at Gentry Middle School, this has been a request that's been on there, that's from both the PE department and the school, because you saw the red area on the map that is Gentry Middle School that still has many more children than all of our other schools, that it's important to be able to run 2 classes in the gymnasium at one time, and they do not have a functional divider in there, and so this is to replace that divider in the gym. And then Hickman has a couple things that we are approving and moving forward this year, or request approval for the bus on the north entrance. There's some repairs to the sidewalks and the bus loop to make improvements there to that where we're dropping off and kids are going in and out of buildings.
And that is going to address the wheelchair ramp,
Yes.
right?
Yes, it has ADA
All be-
considerations,
okay.
yes.
Yes, they're at the north entrance.
There's several,
I can tell you
Issues
Hickman
that-
will be very
yeah.
happy.
there's several issues that'll get remedied with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, along where the baseball and softball, the turf room is in the baseball and concession stand on the west end of the building. There's some space in there that they have requested to be renovating for some additional dressing rooms for our softball and baseball. And so that's down there by the concession stand, again, on the west side that we're want to move forward for this.
And I think they have some matching funds for that too
I
to
think
throw
like
into.
a booster club or somebody might
Yeah.
have some. And the final thing is their weight room equipment. They've requested that that's coming from athletics and from PE to have some new weight room equipment. And then the nature school, this is just the lease purchase payment. That building project is wrapping up, but our principal and interest payment on that debt is $238,000. Nutrition services, again, Lena has some equipment, usually that she requests on a cyclical basis be replaced as well, so $96,000 coming from her.
Do we know if, because I know throughout the facilities audit, there's, in different schools, it will talk about equipment here and there. Do we know if any of this is specific, or I guess, do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I have a list of which schools they
I mean,
come
we'll
from,
be-
so match them,
Okay.
I want to like match them up from which, but she does like has things
I
on.
know she has
yeah,
a
she's
rotation
yeah,
of stuff,
she's good
yeah.
about that. And occasionally things like you're gonna see on the, now, like on Monday night, like she had a refrigerator at Fairview that, sometimes things just quit and we have to like do a
Emergency
transfer
calls.
mid-year or do things like that, but,
It's never fun to have to buy a refrigerator like on a whim,
right, correct.
Especially a commercial one.
especially one in a school.
Yes.
So, yeah.
From the physical education department, we have the acoustical panels. These are in our elementary gym. This is an ADA type thing that we've done and we've been replacing on a rotational type basis the last several years. They've had an allocation and this is the final to, I think, finish the rest of the gyms for $80,000. Practical Arts wanted a laser cutter for Rockbridge High School, so that was a $13,000 piece of equipment. The other thing at Rockbridge High School that is now coming to the end of its useful life is our 50-year-old planetarium. And so if we wanted to continue to use that in the manner that we have to update that. And so the science department is requesting that as well as Rockbridge for $41,495 to update the equipment in the planetarium. The next several items are our technology services item. Again, I think some of these we've already seen come through. And also some of them are partially funded by E-rate funding. And so the backup, the server replacements, we have our staff devices that we were talking about before for 2.8 million, switch replacement for $500,000, and then the upgrade to our storage system for $725,000. And then the next couple, West Boulevard, we have, I think at our principal of data days, you've heard several times that we have one of the playground at West Boulevard, the pre-K playground is very old and poor condition. And so we usually have one of our playgrounds that we try to do with local funding each year. Again, we can't do everything that, I know we were trying to move towards ADA for everything and with our master plan. We will try to make sure that those kind of pieces are incorporated in this, but again, this is just for that one school.
Yeah, and this won't be a complete overhaul, but
Right.
what we are going to do, since we do have that master plan now with set equipment and place, we'll do some things that are on that, so then at a later date, if there is more money through maybe some bond or something in the future, that it will fit the master plan and fits that quality of equipment.
And the roof on there, is that only a portion of the roof, or is that the whole roof?
I believe that's the whole roof, because
Oh.
we have,
I think not on the new part of the building.
no, but
Okay, that's-
on that original part.
On
but-
the original,
Yes.
yeah,
but it's
that's what I
pretty
meant,
extensive,
because I knew that
yes.
it
And
said,
that's
yeah.
where we, every rain, we have
Yes.
a-
Yes.
we have a new
Oh, yeah, I
leak.
know they have indoor,
Buckets.
Yeah,
indoor
newly.
watering.
Yeah.
They can have a greenhouse in there.
And then West Middle School is one of those schools then that we're planning to like bundle some projects to be done next summer before we close that school. We have some flooring upgrades, $625,000, the fax kitchen, and we did Gentry this year. This West Middle School is the next one they're recommending being done for curricular purposes.
And that's just the fax kitchen, that's not their main kitchen.
Correct. And then the media center renovation along Carrie Townsend and her department tried to recommend which ones that need the upgrade. And since we're doing that, we're gonna put that on with the other things happening at West Middle School. And then some small, out here next door, we have some pole vault and high jump standards that need to be replaced for safety reasons. And so that is the other $22,000. And so the total local capital allocation for our new projects is $9,278,950.
All right, so I have a question. What happens when we approve a project of some sort, and then for whatever reason, maybe we don't do the project? What happens to that money?
It rolls back in the fund balance, and we have it, like, if you look at the sheet, like the fund balance that's rolling forward is either from projects that are largely due to some of these, like that you'll see on the next page, like when we move down to the next page for projects that are rolling forward in this.
Oh, yeah.
So some of that is in, because of projects that were either didn't get finished during the for current year, or that we didn't have funding for. This last couple of years, and we've talked about it with our bond projects, the cost escalation of some of the projects that we had originally had on list, that I will touch base on the Rosetta issue here in a minute, but a lot of these projects then are costing more than what we had originally anticipated, and so then either we end up not having enough money, or whatever money that we do have left rolls in the fund balance, and then we have to reallocate the next year. If it's something that we started, or that just because of timing or whatever, we will reallocate it the next year, like these ones that you're gonna see on your next page, the carry forward projects, the flooring project at Benton. Derby Ridge, we had a flooring project last summer where we did one floor at a time, and so we're doing the opposite floor for next summer. We have the water quality issue, so we're looking at which we're required by state statute to do, so with the drinking fountain replacement. And then those Gentry Middle School with the fax kitchen and the overall, like, actual kitchen renovation that are gonna cross fiscal years. And the Performing Arts Center at Rockbridge, that's gonna happen this summer, that'll cross fiscal years. But Rosetta is the big one that I know that was allocated for last year, that because of the funding of some of the other projects, specifically Gentry's, those kitchen renovations that were largely over budget, that are gonna take up some of the funding that we had available for Rosetta.
Well, I ask, and Randy actually also touched on it a little bit, he doesn't know he touched on it, but,
I'm listening intently. so-
yes, when I asked about the fencing around the playground, because we have a same security issue, a significant security issue at Hickman with people accessing the turf area, the track, the PE place all throughout the day. And I know they've had a request for a gate for $20,000 to address that. And I don't think that the project for $42,000 that we approved back in the fall ever happened. So my thought was, the gate's half that. Is that laying around someplace that they could do instead? Is
I
that
believe
something?
part of that was approved in the fall is on board to get started like as soon as school's out.
Oh, I just figured because it was supposed to be double the reason why we did that, it was supposed to be done by the end of October, and so
Yeah, so
Because it
some of
was-
those pieces on that are still in the mix.
the sewer and the
Yes.
water.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was
And
just thinking
that-
if we weren't doing it, then
And
maybe we could
part of
do
that has been the city and how, since we don't have that new building there yet, it was about how the water would be capped for right now and how it would be maintained. But we've gotten an agreement with the city of how that line sets in there until it's fully used,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
And that specific thing that you're talking about was not out of the capital projects fund, that was more of a repair type thing.
Well, I
out
know
of
it
the operating,
wasn't,
so it's a
because it just
different
popped
fund.
up, and so I didn't know, how that worked, but I just know that they, remove people from
Oh,
that
I'm aware.
area a couple of times a week.
I have baseball
And
players.
it's a pretty
Yes.
significant security.
That also climbed the
issue.
fence too, so I'm
You
sure
know.
other people climb the fence.
Oh, I'm sure people climb the
Climb-
fence, but this
hop
is during
over
the
the
school
gate.
day,
Yeah.
while students are, having classes and it's behind the building, so, it's not like we have security out there watching in that corner, so.
Other questions, go
I
ahead.
have one question and one comment. Question number one, we got, it's a pretty good mix of, schools and different things. Assume we got requests from every school about something that they would like.
So no, and we send stuff out and give lots of reminders, and I speak at all the principals meetings multiple times, they hear from me about, so some of them do not send stuff, some of them send stuff that are then that go from our, the facilities moves forward and the school doesn't, or some of it comes from the school and not the facilities, but no, not every school does not submit a request every year.
Right, okay, and then number one, number two, then I think it would behoove the district to put on this sheet where the requests came from. Because I think a lot of times there is a notion that there is a smoke-filled room somewhere where people sit and make decisions on what happens, and then they go, well, why did they decide to do that? And it's like, well, that school requested it. Or more specifically, it's part of the facilities audit, or it's part of the curriculum audit. So putting that on here, putting an asterisk or whatever on it that says, the facilities audit says that Benton Elementary needs a new roof. It's not that we wanna just do it for fun. The facilities audit is specifically saying this school, and so that we can continue showing that we are checking those boxes on those things, like when we do
Kinda like a
CSIP things.
reference.
Yeah, just, anytime we do CSIP something, it's part of the curriculum audit, it's part of, I don't know how you would wanna notate that, but putting that on the
So
record.
I guess my question on that is what happens when something might not specifically align with one of those things? So for instance,
Oh.
community relations, cable cast server, new computer and cameras, right? That is around our community relations stuff that is not directly connected to a CSIP goal, not directly connected to a facility audit. I think that then that sets up for our community to say to us, well, you don't need that then.
Sure.
When we do. Our community relations team is 3 people. For a district this size, and I know people who are district smaller in private schools that have larger community relations teams, right? So I guess that's my concern with that, is that what happens when there are things that have to get done or are needed and do impact the work that happens here, but isn't one of those things.
Right.
I was also gonna say, there's kind of like a chicken and an egg type thing, like what, are we doing it because it's in the facility audit, or are we doing it because, there's water coming in the building? And it was on the,
Or you're bundling.
the cart before the horse type thing,
It makes sense to bundle, like these.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
things at West Middle.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense. Maybe we don't need a fax classroom or a media center renovation right this minute, but it makes sense to do it at the same time you're closing the building anyway.
Correct, and so that's why I kind of like, and when I started, saying at the beginning, sometimes there are pieces of equipment, but might not be priority one, but because of the cost, then some we can fit those things
Sure.
in, or sometimes, like with the bundling of projects, sometimes it makes sense to do those things at the same time, even though, when you look at the priority level, that it might not. So that's why I kind of like to talk through some of things, not necessarily like script it all out beside every single project that's on here. But know that
Yeah, I don't
if there's
dis- yeah,
questions.
I
And I'm
don't
not, and I'm not
disagree.
meaning,
Yeah.
I think I might have said that a lot more firmly than I meant.
Well, as you were,
I'm sorry.
as I was saying it, I knew 100% what you're saying, cause I thought the same thing where it's just like, well, cause yeah, if I'm going through and kind of notating, I'm like, man, there's a lot of what would be deemed admin requests, but it's like, we need all of those things to continue, that's the grease.
Operations, like
that
we
keeps
have, like
things- yeah,
staff has
need
to have
those things, yeah.
devices to be able to like operate our school district. It might not be in the facility audit, but it's a huge cost to the district.
I just like
Oh,
anytime,
absolutely.
because we've spent so much time and money and effort on having those audits done, any time we can show, here we are actually using this thing that potentially was critiqued a lot when it was initially approved, saying that,
I think it's got a good
Yeah,
I
but-
think this reflects a great mix of things with the facilities audit. It reflects a great mix of equipment that is needed, expansion for better employee, workability with the spaces here. Addresses a lot of the needs of the schools. I was surprised that not every school requested something, but a lot of schools got some stuff. I think it's a good balance.
But I think we do try to do that too, like obviously like Russell, like sometimes if there's something, and you guys have had, I think saw like everything that we received. But like some schools that, just receive a $7 million renovation, maybe they don't like get the $20,000 thing that they're asking for. But like try and say, well, you just got an upgrade, try and like mix in like different buildings
Right.
each year too that are getting different
Yeah.
things funded.
Ms. Farrar, I want to give you priority here because we'll be talking about this item again
Yes.
in our meeting
Yes.
that comes up after we get done with
Yes.
long range. So I just wanted to make sure, do you have any other questions that you wanted to ask at this?
No.
Because I just told
I
him,
have
hey, you'll be
now-
here
Yeah,
he
for
told
the
me
next
to-
meeting.
He told you to be quiet, yeah. He said, save it for the next meeting.
Yeah.
No, I have now exhausted everything at the moment.
Yeah, so the one thing I did wanna say, and because we're talking about long range now and the funding, it is, if long range is the consensus of the long range committee to say that we want to try and fund the Rosetta project, then you can make a recommendation, but then it's finances, the finance committee then is their goal to figure out how we're going to fund that, and so,
this is what we talked about
Yes.
yesterday, so yeah,
Yes.
so.
So this is a question you have for us?
yeah, so that's why I put it at the bottom.
Okay.
That is a project that we have that is out there, that has continued to be a high priority. It is on the facility audit, it's continued to be requested, but because of the price tag, it's very difficult to put that, that's now in the $1 million range, that within the amount of local funding that we have available. And so I put it as optional at the bottom. And if it is the consensus of the committee of long range to say we want to fund that project, then I think it should behoove the finance committee to figure out, because we have some money in fund balance to do a one-time, make that a possibility to do a one-time transfer from our operating fund into our capital projects fund to be able to fund that project.
Okay.
Let me just say with Rosetta too, that's a very small building, that's a very old building. Obviously, when we built, Cedar Ridge, we moved out of there, but we have had enough need in different areas that are a little bit less traffic and a little less dense, from a student standpoint, and we're using that building. And we foresee that for a considerable amount of time, we're gonna need that type of facility. So while it's a large amount and it's a small building, it's becoming a very important building, and the programming that we have there is stuff that we will always have, and we
How
will
many
have-
students do we have there, do we know? If you don't, that's fine.
I don't right
Yeah,
offhand.
we don't have a number, but I wanna reiterate what Randy just said, is it's a unique program. You
Yes.
don't have it anywhere, and it provides a service to our scholars, to our community, that's second to none. And without this program, we would be, it wouldn't be a good thing.
Could you say 3 sentences of what the program is, so anybody who's watching
Yes.
us?
So we have our special needs scholars that are there that do have some behavioral issues, do
Okay.
have connecting with the regular school environment. So they're placed there so they can learn how to navigate a school, a learning environment. We do have some that do have physical aggression type of behaviors and so on. So we try to teach and work with them so they could at least have a learning opportunity versus having to send them home or suspend them where they may not be having that learning opportunity.
In a smaller environment,
Yes.
that's better able to meet their needs.
So do we have
So we have
one
a-
motion on the floor, right?
Yeah,
And
well-
do we need to make a,
We need to make it a motion to amend to add the Rosetta.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to amend the recommendation for the 24-25 capital projects to include the additional projects at Rosetta.
second? I'll give
Go
it to,
ahead.
no,
I'll
no,
let you
I'm
have
chair,
it.
so I'll give it to Mr. Gooch. As a second, so, motion, the amendment was motioned by Mr. Lyman, seconded by Mr. Gooch. Is there any further discussion on that amendment to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call it to question. All those in favor of approving the amendment to add the recommendation to the board and to the finance committee to find funding for the Rosetta improvements and HVAC upgrades, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please do the same. The amendment has been unanimously approved. Will now, is there any further discussion on the motion with the, as amended? Seeing none, I'll call it to question. All those in favor of approving the recommendation to the board to approve the 2024-2025 capital projects authorization as amended, please raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed, please do the same. All right, unanimously approved. With that, I will call us to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second by Mr. Gooch.
I'll first,
Wait,
I'll first, Randy seconded.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please do the same. All right. And then we will do a good old 2-minute intermission act to transition over to the finance committee.